Delighted to say I'm joined by Shane Brophy, Head of Sport at the Nenagh Guardian. Shane, how are you doing?
Good, Shane. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So it's the Tipperary quarterfinals coming up this weekend, and just for anyone who isn't aware of what the fixtures look like, Kiladangan against Toom, Thurles Sarsfields against Nenagh Eire Og, Clonoulty-Rossmore against Loughmore-Castleiney, and Borris-Ileigh against Drom-Inch. It's going to be a busy weekend ahead for you. It's not just senior stuff you're going to be covering, it's at all grades. But if we're focusing on the senior one, what's the game that kind of jumps out to you as the most mouth-watering?
I guess it's easy to say they all are. It was like three of them are actually repeats of last year's games and last year's knockouts, and the other one is Thurles and Nenagh have had a nice rivalry in the last decade. Like, so all games are set up nicely. Like that, we're not maybe trying to go back too many years maybe for a previous meeting. But the one for me that's sticking out, I think, is Clonoulty and Loughmore, just on the basis that these two provided the best game in the championship last year. I remember I was at it in Littleton. Clonoulty won in extra time. Loughmore were super for 20 minutes of that game. Looked like they were going to run away with it. They lost Liam McGrath to a red card, and Clonoulty came roaring back. And Timmy Hammersley had an outstanding performance that night. But I think from that, Clonoulty have kicked on. And I thought in the group stages, I thought their performance against Nenagh Eire Og, I think, was their performance at the group stage for me.
Yeah, and like, on top of that, Kiladangan, the way they faded out against Loughmore, Evan Sweeney to the fore, I think he scored 2-3 that day. Like, where do you think Loughmore have kicked on from last year? Because you're saying they lost to they obviously lost last year to Clonoulty-Rossmore,
Yeah.
and Clonoulty went out limply enough against Kiladangan that day in Moyne. So where else have Loughmore kicked on?
I actually think Loughmore are probably still at the same level they are at. Like, I suppose, like, they're a side that probably are still getting the very, very max out of the group of players they have. As Liam McGrath isn't there this year. He went to Australia at the start of the year, didn't come back during the COVID. They have had another McGrath, strangely enough, not surprisingly, Conor McGrath. He's come into the setup this year, 19 years of age, very, very good player. Light player, but no one knows his role. Like, gets on the ball, wins these couple of frees, is able to score. I think he scored a hat-trick of goals for their senior football team last weekend. Like, this is a guy who's probably come out of nowhere maybe over the last couple of years, but he's done very, very well for them. Like, they're still heavily reliant on Noel and John, but look, you see what Evan Sweeney can do, 36 years of age. Like a lot of these maybe elder statesmen of club teams, they seem rejuvenated by the new format this year. They're loving the fact that it's a short championship. He scored 2-3. He was unlucky maybe not to get a hat-trick. He won a couple of other frees as well. So, like, he's one that has found a bit more from last year's team. But I think Clonoulty have kicked on a bit more. Dave Keane, who was with Burgess last year, has gone down there this year. And I just think the performance, that 30-minute spell before and after half-time where they dismantled Nenagh Eire Og, I thought was hugely impressive. I think they've added a bit more speed and energy to their team this year. And that performance against Nenagh was without John O'Keefe, who has been minded with a rib injury. He has come on in the last two games, so he'll definitely start this weekend against Loughmore. But, like, they reminded him. I just thought there was more energy and power to her performance, and definitely not as heavily reliant on Timmy Hammersley this year. That Cathal Burke and Dylan Quirk have kicked on a bit there too. So, look, I think they're definitely a team. Clonoulty, as you say, last year they went out pretty meekly to Kiladangan, but I think they're a different animal this year.
Yeah, you mentioned Dylan Quirk there. I wanted to ask you about him because he obviously had heart issues before, and for a while that would have been scary for him. He stepped into the Tipperary team this year, and during the league, the Waterford game especially, he was named man of the match, and I thought, this is a lad who'll step straight into the, if not a starter, an option that's going to be used regularly by Liam Sheedy. Like, does he kind of change the face of Clonoulty just by virtue of having someone else to take the pressure off Timmy Hammersley?
I definitely, I was like, he definitely was like, he's a scorer, but also he's a ball winner. And I just think definitely going into maybe a winter inter-county championship, that he will give Liam Sheedy definitely a serious option to consider, maybe on slower pitches, and if his physicality also to win the ball will also score. Like, but no, I don't think it's definitely actually helped. It has helped Clonoulty. But to say, last year he was only finding his feet back from that heart problem, and it's definitely something for he's definitely added something to Clonoulty's forward threat. There's no like Conor Hammersley. I think he's a better player a year on from that cruciate knee injury too. Like he's back to his very, very best in the middle of the field as well. So like instead of a quality team like Sean O'Connor in the half back line, and the Heffernan, he'll probably move from 6 back out to wing back as well. Very, very good player from tip under 21s the last few years. So they're definitely a squad that are probably heading towards their peak in terms of their depth. Maybe at minor level they've fallen back to B grade. So I think over the next 3 or 4 years, I think it's Clonoulty's best chance to that 2018 success.
To jump back over to Loughmore, everyone knows about Noel McGrath, John McGrath. We've mentioned Evan Sweeney, and obviously there are a few more. But John Maher, he's really stood out to me in the couple of games that I've seen him.
Yeah, I thought defensively against Kiladangan were very, very good. Like it's easy to look at the McGraths and say they're the key, but like he at 6 is very, very solid. John Ryan that day against the Kiladangan was very, very good too. He certainly negated Cian Darcy for a lot of it. Which is John Maher's a class act. Like if John was able to commit to the Tipperary senior hurlers, he would. He's that good. I suppose he just had his injuries problems the last few years, but thankfully the last 2 or 3 seasons, his body seems to have settled down between club and the inter-county footballers. There's no breakdowns as such, and I suppose in terms of he has committed to the footballers over the last couple of years. So they got to him first when the injuries settled down, and he's happily able to commit to them. And I suppose maybe that football level of training has been able to get his body up to the strength needed to cope with inter-county football, and also to play in dual for Loughmore senior hurling and football.
Do you think that could catch up with them at all, the amount of games they're playing?
I don't think so. No, I think they're able to manage it at this stage. I said that they're into the knockout stages in both. I don't think it was an issue. People said that when they were beaten by Thurles Sarsfields that it was an issue that they had played 2 rounds of football before that. I don't think that's the case. I think previous years they had injury problems because of the dual thing. They're pretty much, apart from Liam McGrath being abroad, they're pretty much at full strength and they have no injury problems at the moment. And
would you be able to call this one? It seems very tight.
Yeah, I'm going to Clonoulty. I just think, based on last year, I just think they've kicked on from where they were 12 months ago. I think they'll win it. I wouldn't be surprised if we need extra time again in this one, like it was 12 months ago.
So Kiladangan against Toomevara, and just to give a flavour of the form lines coming into this, Kiladangan came in as a top seed. Toomevara came through as a second seed with Borris-Ileigh winning that group. But Kiladangan had a fairly thumping win over Drom-Inch, 415 to 18 points. I think Paul Flynn got a couple of goals, Billy Seymour, Dan O'Mara. Then from Toomevara, for a while they were under, well, Burgess were nip and tuck at them. They eventually pulled away and won 319 to 15 points. Burgess were 4 points ahead after the break, so I mean maybe that's a case of sometimes showing up knowing you'll probably see this game out, so it takes you a while to get going. But Toomevara against Kiladangan, what comes to mind when you think of this match? Where the sort of glamour matchup's going to be?
Yeah, I suppose you look at 2 sides that know each other particularly well from minor through 2021 and senior. I suppose Toomevara just won't have good memories. Like they always seem to be on the losing side against this Kiladangan team at the moment, even through those grades. They met twice in the championship last year. Kiladangan won both in the North first round, and then the county quarter final, same stage, where they won by 6 points. But it was the 6 points that flattered Kiladangan. Like Toom were in the game for long spells. But I think Toom under Brazan this year, I think they've definitely kicked on. They're not as heavily reliant on McCarthy in the forwards. You've Kevin McCarthy there now. Jack Delaney has kicked on. I think that the return of David Young into the half forward line, he for the last couple of years has only hurled junior, but this year he recommitted, and he just provides that leadership and in that half forward line. I suppose with Benny Dunn having retired now, he just provides that bit of leadership that he can bring the other guys into the play, the likes of Conor O'Mara as well, Paul Ryan off the bench. Defensively, Joey Malachy's still hurling to a very, very high level at centre back. He's like himself and David Young really providing that leadership. Andrew Ryan was missing in last year's quarter final. He's the full back. He was missing through injury. He's back. So definitely Toomevara are a stronger animal than they were 12 months ago. I think Kiladangan are too. I think they're at their strongest there this year. I think there was Brian Loughney would have been part of their intermediate team that got to the county final last year. Many would have felt that he was good enough to start for their senior team last year. He's back in full time in their senior A team, and I think their first 15 now that they've selected in the last couple of games is their strongest available to them at the moment. Like from 1 to 15, they're very, very good. from Barry Hogan in goals. I think James Quigley at full back is one of those that's going to, if he plays well throughout the championship, is going to put a question before Liam Sheedy about whether he's good enough to come into the panel. I think he is, in terms of, like, he's 23 years of age. He played in the All-Ireland minor final in 2015. Like, he's one of those guys that kicked on very well. Alan Flynn, probably the Mr. Dependable of the Tipperary senior panel. Wherever Liam Sheedy feels there's a problem between 2 and 9, he gets drawn in to do a job. But he's been very, very good in the championship. Willie Connors has been restored to middle of the field. I thought he was maybe out of position in the half forward line last year. He's restored to midfield. He's going very well. And like, then their forwards are just full of scores. Dan O'Mara, Paul Flynn, Brian Mallochny, Joe Gallagher. Thankfully, after his health issues last year, they were sorted out. He's back to his best as well. They're from 1 to 15. They're very, very good. And I think they'll win at the weekend. I think they'll earn it, but I think they just have too much scoring power for Toomevara.
Would it be fair to say Kiladangan will be disappointed how they performed last year in the county final against Borris-Ileigh? Probably left plenty of scores behind them. Maybe Billy Seymour probably would want to atone for that for sure. Like, it's pretty obvious the talent he has and all the scores he puts up for the under 20s there last year. But like, they had a bit of they misfired in that first round game against JK Brackens and were very lucky to get out with a point that day. So where do you reckon they're really at? I mean, should they be a team that's looking to get back to a county final this year, or has the form of other teams lifted?
No, I think that they're definitely aiming to get back to a county final this year. I thought against, I just thought last year when for long periods of last year's championship they were flying up. I just thought in the semi-final against Nenagh there were worrying signs where they were struggling to get into a bit of cohesion, and then the same in the final against Borris-Ileigh. They never hit their straps that day. But I think this year they look pretty different. I was at the Brackens match, and after coming at the first water break, they were 9-3 up, and they were flowing. They were playing some fabulous hurling. Probably should have had another goal with it, but then just Brackens changed their tactics. They brought back a sweeper. They crowded out the defence, and slowly but surely they fought their way back into the match. And the Kiladangan panicked an awful lot. They hit them at 16 wides that night as well. So like, they had plenty of chances. You mentioned Billy Seymour. Like, Billy Seymour can be fabulous, as we saw in the All-Ireland under 20 final last year. But like we saw in the Munster final against Cork last year too, he missed an awful lot of chances. And that night against Brackens, he missed an awful lot of chances. But then come the last couple of games against Roscrea and against Drom-Inch, he was very, very good. So look, when Kiladangan are on song and on flow, I think they're the best team in the county when they're on flow. But when teams get in their heads a small bit and make things difficult, they can be reined in.
Yeah. What about Dan O'Mara? Sometimes when I've watched him play this year, I'm thinking, geez, he wouldn't be too bad in the blue and gold of Tipperary now. Obviously, they're blue and gold anyway.
Yeah, he's an unorthodox sort of a player. He isn't the blue and gold at the moment with the county footballers, and I think that 2-year spell he's had with them has crowned him in terms of he's been able to fill out. He was always a thin, gangly sort of a player, but definitely he's strengthened up. And like, once he gets a ball in a corner forward, we don't think he's that quick, but he's able to stride away from guys, and a very, very good finisher. I suppose people recognise he has a bit of a mullet at the moment, even sticking out through the helmet. Like, so there's a bit of character in him as well. Like, so like, he's one of those guys that developed late in last year's championship. He came up for the intermediate team midway through that campaign last year, but definitely he kicked on this year. And you say they have a forward line. You have Sean Hayes, Joe Gallagher, Billy Seymour, Brian Mallochny, Paul Flynn, and Dan O'Mara. Like, that's as good as 6 forwards there is in the county. Like, and like, you have Andy Lucknan on the bench, Jack Lucknan on the bench. They have an Owen Sharkey on their senior B team that's doing very, very well at the moment. So like, they're really covered in all bases at this stage in their attack. And
if you were to call this one, you're sticking with Kiladangan?
I'm sticking with Kiladangan, but I think it'll be as close as last year. I can't rule out Toom, but I just think Kiladangan's forwards are very, very strong. I think they'll hold the difference.
So one of the glamour quarterfinals is Thurles against Nenagh Eire Og, but of course it's very bad news this week or just out today, that Billy McCarthy, who was out for almost 2 years with a terrible cruciate injury suffered just a couple of years ago now, obviously. But he's done his cruciate again. So that was in the McCarthy-Borris game. It was a dead rubber game that they won 125-19. But that is devastating news, because a couple of years ago this lad was playing for Tipperary, absolutely flying it. He'd made his comeback, and like I saw the game against Kiladangan and a bit of the game against Loughmore, and he looked to be moving nicely. So what a blow.
Oh yeah, it's just devastating for the chap. Like you said, 25 months he was out of the game before he made his return against Kiladangan last month. Like when he played against Kiladangan, that was his first game. He had no challenge match or nothing. It was all in-house games, and like he was super that day. Like first 20 minutes his touch was off, but as the match went on he got stronger and stronger, and then against Loughmore kicked on a bit, and like it was just cruel 8 minutes I think into the McCarthy game he went off. And I suppose there were initial concerns maybe that it was the knee again, but like for to put that so much hard work to come back and be an important and integral part of that Thurles team again. You think that when he got injured 2 years ago, Thurles is the backside sort of fell out of the championship, and last year Thurles were very, very poor, and this year he returns and he adds that bit of physicality to that half forward line, which when Thurles don't have it, they struggle. And it's just going to be so interesting to see how Thurles go for the remainder of the championship without him. Dennis Maher came off injured against McCarthy as well. He's struggling a bit. If he doesn't play, like that's the physicality gone out of the Thurles half forward line.
Yeah,
as well as they played in their 3 group games. It's just going to be interesting to see how their forward line changes. It's easy to say that now they're back in Semple Stadium where it's their second home. They love the open spaces, the Pat Burke and the Conor Lanigans and the Aidan McCormicks will try. But I just think that physicality and that leadership that Billy McCarthy brings, and potentially Dennis Maher, if he doesn't play, will be sorely lost against Nenagh. And I'm sure Nenagh will be buoyed up a little this week now by the news that Billy McCarthy is out.
And have you seen enough from Nenagh to think that they can profit from this? Now, just to give a bit of context on Nenagh, they came through as a second seed, and their most recent outing was a 220-114 win over Eire Og and McCarthy Donahill. So have you seen enough from them? Not
particularly. I think their first game where they were comfortable winners off Holy Cross, I think that said more about Holy Cross maybe being in the headlights, maybe first game back in the top tier, and they just didn't perform. Like they were very, very poor that night, Holy Cross. Subsequently, Holy Cross went out and beat Annacarty and were very unlucky not to beat Clonoulty-Rossmore in their final group game. Just shows you maybe that it wasn't a true reflection of Holy Cross in that first game. Nenagh, very, very good the first 15 minutes against Clonoulty-Rossmore, but whatever that period before and after half time, they were just so flat. Clonoulty ran through them for sport. But on that night, Declan O'Dwyer pulled off 5 super saves in the Clonoulty goal. Like it was nearly a running battle between him and Jake Morris. I think Nenagh could have come out of that game, said they would have won it, even though a performance suggested that they were well off the pace. For 58 minutes in the game against Annacarty in the last round, that they were really put to their pin and their collar. They got a late goal through Adam Carey, which got them over the line. The 9-point margin flattered them. It's going to need Nenagh to perform at their very, very best to win this game, which they can do. But like Jake Morris has been super in this championship, really seems to be carrying that forward line. But like if they can get Tommy and Michael Heffern and Paddy Murphy and Adam Healy, Pierce Morris to really play to their very, very best, like they can win this game. But it's going to come down to the Nenagh backs and how they keep things tight against these Thurles forwards, even without the Billy McCarthy's and Dennis Maher. So the Thurles get into this open space and are moving the ball around. It's hard to see how Nenagh are going to stop them.
Do Nenagh have the players to get in their face? Because like I had been watching Thurles, and especially in that first game against Kiladangan, where for 45 minutes they weren't that impressive, and then after the second water break I think they won 1-8 to a point, something like that, and all of a sudden the team really started to click. Kiladangan faded away. But he was just thinking that perfect there. Dennis Maher and Billy McCarthy can both move and they can both win ball. Pa Burke is inside. It just seemed like there's a lovely balance there. But do Nenagh have the players to turn it into a physical game to make those smaller size Thurles Sarsfields forwards not really fancy it?
I don't think so, but I actually don't think Nenagh probably want that either. I think Nenagh would like a bit of an open game where maybe if you score, we score. Like, and I said they were probably one of the few clubs in Thurles Sarsfields 4 in a row run that gave them the most trouble. I say, but there was a county semi-final and a quarter-final that both went extra time. I think was it in 2014 that Nenagh dumped Thurles out of the championship in a group stage, but that game was in the rag in a tight field, whereas these games where Thurles have managed to edge Nenagh out have been in Semple Stadium. So I think Nenagh match up well against them. I don't think they want to turn it into a physical game, but I say just how Nenah's backs hold up. Like Nenagh have good backs in Conor Ryan and in Dara Quinn. Hugh Maloney still so strong. Conor McCarthy from the Tip under 20s last year. They have some very, very good hurlers in their half back line, but whether they can be tight enough to keep an eye on the Aidan McCormicks and Pa Burks and Conor Mannigans remains to be seen. I think it's definitely in terms of picking a winner, it's narrowed now without Billy McCarthy. I still think Thurles will have enough, but it's definitely going. It's a fascinating one for me in terms of what Thurles bring and what Nenagh bring. We know what Thurles are going to bring. What Nenagh we get will tell us an awful lot about how this game will go on Saturday evening.
Like maybe 15 years ago when Sars were trying to win their first county title in God knows how long, you would imagine that weighed very heavily on them. Like Nenagh at this stage, it's been a long time since they've won a county title. They've had a few near misses, getting to semi-finals, losing finals. Even the Clonoulty won a couple of years ago that I'd say most people were tipping them to win. Do you reckon it's weighing heavily on them at this stage, that famine?
I actually don't think so. It's very strange. I don't think it weighed on them the last couple of years where they lost the semi-final last year, lost a final in 2018. It's just that it just weren't good enough on the day. I can't say that they psyched themselves out come final day or the big matches. They just when push came to shove on the big day, they just weren't good enough. People in Nenagh might think that this year is the 25th anniversary of their last title success in '95, and I think maybe there's a aligning of the stars that this year could be the year. And you think if they're able to get past Thurles on Sunday, you wouldn't bet against them. But I actually, from talking to lads in Nenagh and knowing them, I don't think it's a psychological issue that's holding them back. I just think when it came to the big day, or it came to that match in that 60 minutes in a knockout setting, they just weren't good enough against Kiladangan last year and against Clonoulty in the final 2 years previously, even though you would think they had done the hard work in some of the earlier rounds. But that tends to be the case with Nenagh. Sometimes they tend to get the harder work done in the earlier rounds, and when it comes to a one-off knockout game, sometimes they just don't produce the complete performance on the day.
So are you sticking with Sars?
Sticking with Sars, yeah.
Okay, and then the final quarter-final, Borris-Ileigh against Drom-Inch. Near neighbours, just a hen's kick between the two parishes. Are you looking forward to this one? They met last year. Actually, in my memory of the game last year, the quarter-final in Holy Cross, I think that day, was that Borris-Ileigh didn't score for the first 10 or 12 minutes, didn't score for the last 10 or 12 minutes, but won the game in between. Now maybe this was a Borris team that wasn't as sure of itself at that stage, and they've played a lot of championships since, getting all the way to an All-Ireland final, and that bonds the team. It sort of gels them, they get used to their game plan, all that kind of stuff. So whereas Drom wouldn't have played those games. So do you think the gap has kind of grown between the two teams, or near rivals it'll be tight?
Yeah, I think it has. I remember that game last year. Like I thought with 10 minutes to go, I think Borris-Ileigh had a couple of goal chances. Like they seem to be going for goals instead of maybe tapping over the points to build on their lead. And you said, but I think when Drom got it back to it, was it a draw or 1 point game? You said there's only momentum in one team, and that was with Drom, but Borris-Ileigh held out, and that's why it took them all the way to Croke Park in January in an All-Ireland final. I've seen Borris-Ileigh a couple of times this year. Like they've really, nothing seems to have changed, but what they do have now is that champions aura about them that comes with a team. You know it yourself, Akula. You just feel confident every time you go out. You know what has to be done. You won't panic in difficult situations like they had against Upper Church Tramban in their last group game. At half time, the match was a draw. The Borris-Ileigh had done nothing in the first half. They really seemed to have been tied up by Upper Church. But the second half, they didn't actually change an awful lot of what they did in the second half against Upper Church. They just re-galvanised themselves. I think the one tweak they made again in the second half was that made sure that Jerry Kelly sucked Gavin Ryan, their Upper Church centre back, further out the field. That left Niall Kenny one-on-one with his full back, whereas in the first half Niall Kenny was running into a crowd when they were dropping ball in the second half. he was 1-on-1 with his full back, and he was unplayable. Like Niall he's a very unorthodox type of full forward. And I would say unorthodox is unfair, but he's there's not an awful lot to him. He's not the quickest, but by God, put him in a 1-on-1 battle under a high ball. There's nobody to beat him, and like when he says he's best, he'll win frees, he'll score goals, and like in that mode, he's very, very hard to stop. And Borris-Ileigh tend to thrive off that. Against Burgess, he was the very, very same, and it seems to galvanise the rest of the forwards around him: the James Devaney's, the Kevin Mahers, the Jerry Kellys. Even Conor Kenny was held. His brother Conor was held scoreless against Upperchurch from play. Borris-Ileigh still scored 120. You would have thought this time last year, if Conor Kenny was held, Borris-Ileigh would be in trouble. And it just shows you how much they've kicked on in the last 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was saying on the podcast with Michael Verney there last week that I'd love to see just a little bit more short ball play, like Dan McCormick when he went back as the extra man. And I would say this to him as well, blasting too many balls to the cloud. Just play it short to whether it's Kevin Maher, JD Devaney, whoever, Jerry Kelly in the half forward line. Yeah. That would draw out the half back line a bit more, and the long ones that you do hit into Niall Kenny, he'll be on his own a bit more. And I think that would actually cause Drom an awful lot of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I said it in my report last week that Dan actually probably was on ice for a couple of days after the match, the amount of ball he picked up. And I suppose that's a reflection probably of the poor tactics of Upperchurch on the day. Like, they just hit ball after ball, not failing to remember Dan was there sweeping up, and he did superbly well. I suppose it's the one aspect of the Borris-Ileigh performance that do tend not to make proper use of the amount of ball their half back line does win with Dan and with Brendan Maher as well. Like, especially with the forwards, I had JD Devaney and Kevin Maher have kicked on to another level this year. Like, they're a year older, a year stronger, a year confident. Shane Kenny is there this year, another of the Kenny tree. He's another very effective forward. Scored a couple of points in the last couple of games. He was injured most of last year with a cruciate. So, like, definitely their forwards are definitely a little bit stronger. Defensively, I don't know if you have the inside scoop whether Paddy is fit to play this weekend, and whether I think it's their full back line does miss his assurance, and look with Seamus Callan at full forward for Drom. I'm sure they'd like to have him there. I don't think Sean McCormick is as confident there as he is at a wing back. I think Seamus Burke and Liam Ryan probably do miss Paddy there in terms of that bit of assurance in the full back line. Probably James McCormick and goal would like him there as well. So it'll be interesting to see if Paddy's able to go on Sunday.
If you were a Drum, are you thinking keep Seamus Callanan closest to goal where he can do the damage, or are you nearly thinking we need him out in the half forward line to make sure he's getting onto the ball? Obviously you'd like him in both, and you want a danger man close to goal, but the bit of a needs must, like Johnny Ryan has gone back to centre back with no James Woodlock this year. So do they kind of almost need his presence a bit further out the field?
I think they have to, with the way Borris-Ileigh are probably going to set up. The Borris-Ileigh game plan is from going back to the county quarter final last year, and even through the Munster final and the All Ireland final. It's more or less to either have Brendan or Dan McCormick as a fourth half back, sort of a sweeper, and nobody's been able to counteract it at this stage. It's pretty obvious, and like if Borris-Ileigh are going to do that on Sunday evening, it's probably worthless playing Seamus Callan in full forward. He's going to get starved. So you either bring him to half forward and maybe out into the wing, maybe where he'll get an awful lot of ball, and where he will, if they could isolate him on one of the Borris-Ileigh halfbacks. You think David Collins has gone from centre back to wing forward for Drom-Inch this year, and I think that's his best position. He's a big, good ball winner, but he can also hit 3 or 4 points from play. So I think maybe if Drum are going to win this game, I think it's going to be with Seamus further out the field. Maybe you could put David Butler in at full forward to be that goal-scoring threat, which he has been off the bench in their first 2 games against JK Brackens and Drom-Inch. Like, if he didn't come off the bench in those 2 games, Drum would have been beaten and out of the championship. But they got the 2 wins and they made it into the quarterfinals. And I think they're a team. They're of the 8 teams are in. I think they're a team that scraped into the quarterfinals that they were doing it, even though they were through after the first 2 games. They were 5 points down against Roscrea midway through their first game. Got a fortuitous enough goal from Seamus Callan for a long range free that got him back into the match. Against Brackens, admittedly, they lost Johnny Ryan to a red card after 5 minutes, and to win a game like that, in 25-degree heat with 14 men for 60 minutes was a notable victory. You can't say anything against them. But against Kiladangan, conceded 4 goals, could have conceded another 3 more. I'm just not convinced by Drom-Inch at this stage. Maybe the local derby element might draw a bit more out of them this weekend and gets them to win, gets them to beat Borris-Ileigh. But long term, I'm not sure whether they're good enough to win a championship. Let's say the derby element might get them to win this game at the weekend, but they need to find a way to get Seamus Canelan into the game. And I think half forward line might be the way to go. Maybe out in the wing, maybe taking him away from Brandon, but maybe out in the wing he might be able to try. But definitely, if Borris-Ileigh plays sweeper, I think it would be a bit of a waste at full forward.
And then now we want to come to your rankings of where the teams are at. By the way, I presume you're going with Borris-Ileigh as your as your verdict there. Yeah, we said we'd lay down the gauntlet to you and see if you'd pick a power ranking. So basically the teams from 1 to 8 who you think is most likely to win the county championship here. So I suppose I'll let you call them out there and I'll bring it up on screen.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the top. I suppose from what we've seen so far this year, Thurles Sarsfields are the best team in the county. The format this year, I suppose the fact that Rona Maher, Paddy Maher, they've all been able to focus on the county. Michael Cahill is back to full fitness, back to his best in defence. But unfortunately, they're down Billy McCarthy now. But still, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe without Billy, they won their 3 games. They came out of the toughest group. The Beckler won. Okay, you might say they were 4 points down after 45 minutes in that game, but I thought the intensity in that first 45 minutes was ridiculous. I thought the hits that went in that match were unbelievable. I thought maybe Killarwan, maybe the hits actually wore Killarwan down in the last 15 minutes. I think physically they've been very, very strong. Sars B team in the Seamus Marine Cup are in the quarterfinals. They won their group. It just shows you the depth of talent. I suppose the quality of guys they're training in their night in, night out. I still give them number 1. Borris-Ileigh number 2. They're champions. They're unbeaten in the group, getting to this stage. They've done nothing wrong in the group stage. Convincing over Burgess. Half time against Upper-Church-Strumban, draw match. They ended up winning by 7 points. Very, very strong. Number 3, I've gone for Clonoulty-Rossmore. Off the basis that I think their performance against Nenagh was probably the best I've seen in the group stage. Very, very strong. John O'Keefe is back. Plenty of scoring threat there. I think they're definitely a more athletic team than they were this time last year. They're number 3 for me. Number 4 is Kiladangan. I could probably rate them even as high as number 2 but it's just that niggling doubt maybe with them. It's sort of player for player, they're probably the best 15 maybe in the county, but I suppose maybe until they win that big county final, you can still have a little bit of doubt over them. So that's why I have them number 4. But in terms of talent and scoring ability and their style of play when they get it going, I don't think anybody can counteract them. Maybe Thurles can. That's why I have them at number 4, but I could have them as high as number 2. Number 5, I've Loughmore. Look, they've been there for the last 10 years. We know what they're going to get from them. The two McGraths are going to lead the way. They have Evan Sweeney there. They have Brian McGrath stepping forward. John Maher. I just think from maybe to have a very, very good 10, 11 players, whether they have the latter 4 maybe to win a county championship to make up a strong 15, I'm not sure, but definitely they're a strong number 5. Number 6, gone for Nenagh Eire Og. They're still there. You could say that they've fallen at the final hurdle or the semi-final hurdle the last 2 years, but they always seem to get there. You probably think that they're probably drawn the short straw in Thurles, but I think they'll welcome that style of hurling that Thurles will play. That'll suit them. I think if they win this game, you can't rule them out either. Toomevara at number 7. They've improved this year under Owen Breslan, there's no doubt about it. Unbeaten in their group, two draws and a win over Burgess. But I suppose the fact that they weren't able to win the game against Borris-Ileigh and Upper-Church suggests that they're maybe a year or 2 away yet, that they're a team that have kicked on over the last 2 years. I know they got to a semi-final 2 years ago. That was probably a time when they were it was unexpected really. They were probably only setting out in their journey I think last year they kicked on. This year they kicked on a bit further. Even if they lose the quarter final, I think they're a better team this year than they were last year. And then at number 8 at Drom-Inch, I just think, as I said when we were previewing the Borris-Ileigh match, they could have easily been out of the championship as being in it. Bit fortuitous against Ross Gray. I think that, and that's the manner in which they conceded the goals against Kiladangan, admittedly without their centre back Johnny O'Ryan, who was suspended. He'll be back for this game. I just for me, they haven't shown enough this year to say that they're undoubtedly that they definitely say they'll win a county championship. But I think of the last 8, I think they're definitely the bottom of the list for me at the moment.
Yeah, and what stands out to me there is your top 4 are basically the top seeds. You expect all the top seeds to come through anyway by the looks of it. And also your 1, 2 and 3 are the county champions of the last 3 years. Then Kiladangan in 4th, who've obviously been to a couple of finals in recent times. I would wonder about Thurles now, if both Dennis Maher and Billy McCarthy's definitely out, but if Dennis Maher is out as well, geez, I'd give Nenagh an edge there. You might be looking at rejigging it a small bit. Maybe Borris-Ileigh go back into 1 and Clonoulty 2, and maybe Sars drop a bit. But I think an awful lot of that, it is hard to argue with you, but definitely throw it out there. And if any viewers want to comment in and fix Shane's wagon, please feel free to do so.
It's going to be so interesting now, like to see but how different Thurles will be without Billy McCarthy and potentially Dennis Maher. Dennis has a shoulder problem. Like he'll probably get out there, but like these shoulder problems, like it just needs one good belt or one good challenge, and it is gone. And I didn't see much of the Loughmore game watching it back, but I just thought their presence in the half-hour line opened up the spaces for them in McCormack and Pa Burke that night, Conor Lanigan. So if those guys aren't there to do the donkey work, to take the hits, to get the breaking ball down to the scores, there's no doubt there'll be a different animal. I think we'll know an awful lot more about Thurles after we see them on Sunday, definitely without Billy McCarthy and potentially without Dennis Maher.
Brilliant stuff. Shane Brophy of the Nenagh Guardian. I'm sure we'll chat again soon. All the best.
Cheers, Shane.